Hello, everyone. I thought I'd go ahead and get video for Chapter 6 started. And so let's see what we have to do. Hopefully, you all are doing well. Looks like it's been raining quite a bit here in Warrensburg, and it looks like Saturday and Sunday throughout the day it's supposed to be able to do that too. So, anyway, let's go ahead. This week, you'll be looking at the category of EBD, Emotional Behavior Disorder, in Chapter 6. When you think about the terminology for this category, many people can get differing views of just who these students are. You see the term emotional, and most of you think about students with intense feelings, and then you see the term behavioral, which can lead you to behaviors, many of the times bad behaviors, which is exactly what do they mean. However, the category, your students will be the same in many ways, but also very different. I think one of the best ways to describe this category to me is trust. Most of these students will need to earn your trust, and you'll need to earn theirs. And I know some of you are like, no, I'm the teacher. Well, yes, you are. But with students that are in this category, trust goes a long way. Many of my past workings with students in this category I still remember. Some good, some bad. But wonder how they're doing right now. Wonder how they're making it. So let's go ahead. They're not quick to let outsiders into their bubble or space. Let's see some other things. I'll explain more once you've dove into the chapter. Read about Michelle from Farmington, Utah. But don't forget to learn about the definition, how it can be vague, what it is and what it is not, externalizing and internalizing of behaviors, the potential for academic achievement, and how prevalent this group of students can be or should be, the many causes of EBD, the 5 dimensions of behavior, functional analysis, different educational approaches, school-wide behavior support, student relationships, and educational placement options. It's a long list and a category that can be very dear to your heart. You'll gain these students' trust and with it their heart. Many of these students will be the ones that pull at your heartstrings, especially when you realize just how hard they are trying to succeed, but many people don't understand it. Then you'll have to realize, and the toughest part, how many of these students can and will be, unfortunately, in the juvenile justice system. There are a lot of these students are at risk. You see them at school and work with them so hard to succeed, and then, unfortunately, you see their name in a newspaper, and probably not a good place. So I'll let you get into the rest of the chapter and go from there. Discussion board and quiz this week. You'll have a discussion board. There's 3 different scenarios on this discussion board. You'll need to choose one of them and give your hypothesis. Make sure and read the instructions. Make sure and do it by Wednesday night, and then come back on frequently to give your ideas to others. And then once the discussion board is closed, I will come back on and give the real answers to the stories for the students that you looked at. Then we'll have the quiz. Along with that, ED for the DI collection will be due. So let's go ahead and get into the PowerPoint for right now. I'm going to go ahead and enlarge this a little bit. Move this around a little bit here. Some of the things you'll want to look into are where it talks about the BDIS, ABCDF chart, the BIP, FBA example. A lot of these are right there in your chapter, and some of them are online. Also want to look at socially maladjusted versus ED. A lot of times there's some discrepancies over what teachers and administration feel are students that should be in special education under this category, but in reality, they are under that socially maladjusted definition, which in turn then means they're not a special education student. We talked about homework. You'll have the discussion. You'll have the classroom quiz. I'm taking off a couple things here for you. The chapter quiz, and then make sure and get 6 strategies put onto your Pinterest board. I know I've had a couple questions. Basically, each week you need to get 6 pins on your Pinterest board. Follow the rubric. If you have questions, get with me. You don't want to wait. It can be very easy to get these pins and get this assignment completed as long as you do it week by week. If you wait till the end of the semester when you have everything else due, it's not going to be fun for you. There are about 3 videos in here. And first of all, I want you to look at Bobby. So go ahead and go and pause me and watch the YouTube video on Don't Give Up on Bobby. All right. Hope that opened your eyes to a little bit of what we're going on. I feel like that's a good video to get you started, to give yourself a better understanding of what's going on. So let's get into chapter objectives. You're going to be able to compare and contrast the definition of emotional disturbance in the IDEA and the definition of emotional or behavior disorders by the Council for Children with Behavior Disorders. You'll be able to list examples of externalizing and internalizing behaviors, and also identify factors that might account for the disparity between the number of children receiving special education under the emotional disturbance category and the researchers' estimates of the prevalence of emotional or behavior disorders. And you can probably figure out what they are already. It's similar to some of the other chapters on the reasons. Describe major risk factors for behavioral problems in adolescence and adulthood. You'll be able to specify several screening and assessment tools for identifying emotional behavior disorders and state reasons why the schools seldom use them. And then name and give an example of 4 scientifically supported strategies for educating students with emotional behavior disorders. And again, explain why there is more debate over including children with emotional or behavior disorders in general ed classrooms than including children with other disabilities, and describe the greatest impediments to children with emotional and behavior disorders receiving the most effective education possible. So let's write down what you think about when you hear the term emotional disturbance. You might, before you watch this video, go ahead and write down your thoughts about what you think is a definition or what you think of when you hear the term emotional disturbance. Just go ahead and take a few seconds, write down what comes to mind, and then watch the video, Definitions of ED. Pause my video. All right. I hope that opened your eyes a little bit more. Each video, I think, gives a little bit more clarity as to what emotional behavioral disturbance is and who it might be. So let's look at the IDEA definition. 1 or more of the following characteristics displayed over a long period of time and to a marked degree that adversely affects educational performance. The inability to learn, not related to other factors. The inability to build or maintain satisfactory peer or teacher relationships. Inappropriate feelings or behavior under normal conditions. A general pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression. So that's the IDEA definition part of it. Here's the other part. A tendency to develop physical symptoms or fears associated with personal or school problems. Definition does not apply to children who are socially maladjusted unless they have an emotional disturbance, and the definition also includes schizophrenia. So let's look at the DESI definition a little bit more. It talks about the social maladjusted term there, the criteria that goes along with that. And then what is socially maladjusted is what I thought was coming up next. 2 such definitions are a child who has a persistent pattern of violating societal norms with truancy, substance abuse, a perpetual struggle with authority, is easily frustrated, impulsive, and manipulative. And that was by Doe versus Board of Education. or a child who is incapable of fully profiting from general education programs of the public schools because of some serious social and emotional handicap, but who is expected to profit from special education. And that was by Springer versus Fairfax. Basically, we do have a lot of difficulty when the student mentioned drugs. If you feel like they are, and most times schools have an understanding of what students might be experimenting in those types of activities. And it's going to be very hard to say that student is a student with a special need due to testing and all these other items if we're having the effects of alcohol or drug abuse right along with that. So that's where some of that comes in. In Doe versus Sanders, the Illinois State Board took the position that a child whose functioning was impaired by reason of dependency or addiction to alcohol or other substances were not maladjusted. So you've kind of got some differing of opinions here. You'll want to kind of watch what your district thinks about those situations and go from there. And by now, and that was in back in 98 or in 89, excuse me. An inability to learn is along with that. An inability to build, maintain, we talked about that. Inappropriateness, general pervasive mood, a tendency to develop physical symptoms or fears associated with personal and social problems. And there's the characteristics. Here's where it talks about vagueness. Definition is vague and subjective. What are satisfactory peer and teacher relationships? That's subjective. Depends on who is answering that question. What does inappropriate behavior look like? Inappropriate to me is going to be different than an inappropriateness to you. The same thing goes with educators and parents and students. What is inappropriate behavior look like? The definition as written includes children on the basis for which they are included. So how does one differentiate between social maladjusted and true emotional disturbance? Individual teacher expectations and tolerances make identification a difficult and subjective process. Now I want to talk about two of the characteristics of primary behavioral excesses or externalizing behaviors and internalizing behaviors. The externalizing behaviors is noncompliance, is a kingpin of behavior around which other behavioral excesses revolve. Lying, temper tantrum, stealing, property destruction, threats of violence or violence toward peers or teachers. Those are externalizing behaviors. Internalizing, too little socialization with others, overly shy or immature, withdrawn, hypochondria, easily upset, and difficult to calm are the two characteristics. You'll want to look through your book, kind of make sure you understand those. They will come up again. Academic achievement. Low GPA, 1 or more years below grade level academically. Typically difficulty passing competency exams for their grade level. High absenteeism. At risk for school failure and early dropout. Reciprocal relationship between behavioral problems and low academic achievement. Many have learning disabilities and or language delays. And many times, though, I've seen those students that are in this category have a very average to maybe even sometimes higher average IQ. So the IQ sometimes doesn't really come into play too much as the behaviors that come into play and cause them not to be able to be, at grade level with their peers. Some of the other characteristics, many more children with EBD score below the means on IQ tests than do children without disabilities. Students with EBD are often rejected by peers and experience great difficulty in making and keeping friends. Less participation in extracurricular activities, lower quality peer relationships, and lower levels of empathy toward others. Students with EBD are 13.3 times more likely to be arrested during their school careers than are students without disabilities. What I want you to do now is pause the video and look at how many are there ED questions. So go ahead and click that and watch the video and then come back. All right, the prevalence. The estimates vary for EBD. During the 2012-13 school year, children 6 to 21 received services under the category EBD represented less than 0.5% of the school-age population. Gender, the vast majority are boys with externalizing disorders in the form of antisocial and aggressive behaviors. There are women or girls in this category, but overly than not, most of them seem to be boys. Some of the causes: brain injury, dysgenesis, genetics, and temperament. You'll want to go in and read a little bit more about those to get a better understanding of those biological factors. There are also some environmental factors: home, relationship with parents, inconsistent parent practices, school, teacher actions, ineffective or instruction. Excuse me, not sure who that is. Community, drug and alcohol abuse, gangs, deviant sexual behavior. And there's a complex pathway of risks that are in with those causes. But I would definitely go into your book and read a little bit more about the biological environmental factors that are involving in those situations. Identification and assessment, screening test used to determine if intervention is warranted. There's behavior rating scales or checklists that parents, students, teachers may end up helping you fill out to come up with a good idea if they follow and could be identified as a student with an EBD. Direct observation and measurement. The actual behaviors that cause concerns are clearly specified and observed in a setting where they normally occur. In other words, if you're looking at a student that might be EBD, you're not going to look at just one classroom. You're going to vary that, probably 3 or 4 classrooms, to see if you see the same things going on in each classroom. Is it just one teacher that is primarily having more troubles with this student, or is it all across the board? And then if a student is not having difficulty in a class, what are the differences? What makes that class better for that student? And that will help you also gain some ideas as to what might be beneficial in the other classes where they're having trouble. Useful for educational planning. Functional behavioral assessment, and there is a PDF on that on your on the Chapter 6 area, so please look at that. That will help you definitely with your assignment too. Functional Behavior Assessment, or FBA, used to help understand the why of the challenging behavior. Knowledge of a behavior's function points to the design of a behavior intervention plan. Indirect functional behavior assessment. There's also descriptive functional behavior assessment, like an ABC recording. And then there's functional analysis. These are all different types of assessment and identification means that can help your team not only make sure they are a student with EBD, but also, no matter what, help the teachers and the people involved understand the student and the why the behaviors are coming about to help get over that. Curriculum goals. Academic skills. There's direct, explicit, and effective instruction. I definitely look over the effective instruction side of the book to get a better idea of what that's all about. Social skills. Learning the social and non-academic skills that match teacher expectations. The instruction should include modeling of examples and non-examples, opportunities for role-playing, guided practice with feedback, and strategies to promote generalization to the natural environment. This is one of the first areas that I was a teacher in, was a social skills class in the middle school area. And we did a lot of role playing. We did a lot of examples of good, examples of bad role playing. And it helps the students understand. It also can make it a little more lighthearted so that the students get a better understanding and will continue to work with you with what you're trying to do. And it helps you in a small, normally those classes are better off in a smaller class size if you've got a social skills, just to make sure that you're able to work with the different types of behaviors that you will be seeing in that classroom if it's just a social skills class area. Teacher praise, active student responding. School-wide positive behavioral intervention and support. There's Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, very similar to the RTI, so look over what that is. Those are research-based teaching practices. There's also self-management, self-monitoring, and self-evaluation. Definitely look at the proactive management style. Those would be very helpful for those that are going right into the profession, but also helpful for those learning. Look at token economy or level system. A lot of schools, you'll hear the term level system in those. Peer mediation and support. You've got peer monitoring, positive peer reporting, peer tutoring, peer support and confrontation, and group contingencies. Just make sure and look through those so that you have a good general understanding of what those different contingencies are. I wanted to include the next diagram, gives an idea, correctional facilities and youth with ED. I used to have a video that I was able to show that really opened my eyes, and I know the eyes of the students, as far as the different correctional facilities that have students with disabilities. And you'll see in there specific learning disability 45%, other disabilities 3%, MR, which is what it was back then, but ID 7%, and emotional disturbance is in that 40% range too. So just something to look at. The next video, Born Bad, I want you to go to 1 minute 28 seconds and then start watching it there. Gives you another perspective about youth with EBD. So go ahead and pause my video and then open up the YouTube video and then move to 1 minute 28 seconds. All right. Fostering strong teacher-student relations. I do think this is one of the key parts of all teachers and experiences, but especially for this category. Differential approach, witness or be the victim of acts of anger without responding similarly. It's very difficult in human nature if somebody's yelling at you or somebody's getting mad at you not to do the same. Well, you can't do that if you are working with EBD students. You have to have patience and give them the opportunity to let some of their frustrations out, not take it defensive. Many times their reactions towards you are not really towards you, but they're because of something else going on at home, in their environment, socially, but something many times not in your classes. So, empathetic relationship, recognize and understand the nonverbal cues reflective of the children's individual needs. You'll know as you start learning about your own students, you will start knowing and better understand how their actions, how their mood is without even really asking them. I know one of the things I did is I had a scale on their desk when they came in. Now, granted, I had smaller class sizes, being a self-contained BD teacher at that point in time, but I would have a scale on the front of their desk. And when they came in, they gave me an idea on that scale. They moved, it was just a piece of paper that said 1 through 10, a piece of yarn, and then some type of button or some type of bead or something on there they could move back and forth. And it gave me an understanding real quickly what type of mood they were in and kind of what I needed to do, whether I needed to triage with them and get the other students going on an assignment, or let them chill for a little bit and then get with them, or maybe they were fine and ready to go. Focus on alterable variables. Help replace antisocial and maladaptive behaviors with socially appropriate behaviors. You always want to try to find the better behavior out of that, and that's essentially what you're going to be working with students that are in this category, is for them to not do as many things that are on the bad behavior side and find better ways of them reacting to a situation, because many times that's what they're doing, is they're reacting to a situation. Acquire academic knowledge and skills. Of course, that's what they're there for, is for teaching. But in an area like this, I found behavior management being the first key to getting them to do well in the academic, was being able to have them trust you and work with them and have good behavior management skills in the classroom to get them turned aside. And I think one of the videos in here shows that. I forget which one the name of it was, but shows a student coming in and not really putting his head down on his desk and not really wanting to do much. And you may be going, well, he didn't do anything. Well, it's related to what he's done in the past. There were students that I had that teachers in a high school would be very upset with and couldn't understand why things were happening, and they'd be really down with the student. But luckily, I was in an area where I was with that student in fourth or fifth grade, and then moved to the high school, so I was able to remember and know how their behaviors were in the fourth and fifth grade, and be able to shed some light on how much that student's actually grown. So it's relative and perspective. Sometimes you need to ask a few questions and just maybe know that they were probably much worse than what you've seen them now, and get some discussion with the special ed teacher on how they're doing and what you could do to help them. Some of the placement options. Sorry, I got on a story. During the 12-13 school year, about 44% of students with EBD received their education in general ed classroom, and it has a breakdown: 18% in resource rooms, 20% in separate classrooms, 13% in special schools. And then look here, we haven't seen this in a while. There are 2% in correctional facilities, 2% in residential schools, and 1% in home or hospital placement. Most students with emotional or behavioral disorders have a serious, long-standing problems that require intensive intervention. Was added there at the bottom. Some of the placement options: a major challenge is arranging an environment in which academic and social skills can be learned at exceptional rates while protecting the safety of all children. The CCBD does not believe that the general education classroom is the most appropriate placement for all students with EBD. Now realize it said all students. So there are some that you might be able to do that with. I do think that they need to see good behavior. I do think that having students with EBD only in one classroom with other students that have EBD is sometimes not the best viable option. They need to see the good behavior. They need to have peer support. They need to have that atmosphere, that classroom environment. But I realize there's a fine line between how much regular ed time and how much special ed time. So each one's going to be different. I think you probably heard that before too. Support after general class placement should include crisis intervention support plan, and ongoing consultation and in-class modeling, and intervention by a special educator trained to work with students with behavior disorders. Many times, these students will have a safe spot, a safe room. Many times their case manager may have all students that have EBD on their IEP. So if there is trouble, if there is some concern, they may go to that classroom for a few minutes to kind of chill down and kind of get some triage time before going back to the classroom. Many times this can help students get over and be able to come back to class than if a teacher pushes their buttons. This is where you really need to have an idea of what their plan is, if they have a behavior intervention plan or a BIP. If they have a case manager, talk to them to find out their trigger points, and maybe things they like, so that you can hopefully start making a connection and start earning some trust. And then instead of going to the principal's office, there are other options that you can do to get the student back turned around and back in class and learning. Because if he's not in your class, he's not going to be learning what he needs to, and that's going to be difficult too. Placement options. A major challenge is arranging an environment in which academic and social skills can be learned at acceptable rates while protecting the safety of all children. I do want to say in here, you do need to have a safety plan. If you have students, not necessarily even just students with EBD, but other students that might have some behavioral issues, you need to have a safety plan. I know in my classroom where I had, could have upwards to 9 or 10 students with EBD. I did have a pair at that time, and so if anything happened, the other students might have to leave the classroom, go out into the hallway, or go to a buddy room, and the para would go with them. And then in the meantime, the para would also alert the principal's office, or somebody that depending on your school, maybe a resource officer, and then I would stay with the student and try to calm them down and keep them safe. But different circumstances may warrant different safety type plans, so you do need to have that also. Support after general class placement should include, we talked about that. Okay. The group activity I don't have down here because this, of course, is an online course, but I would look at it. What are the most important skills for teachers of students with emotional disorders? I would look at that and see if you can come up with an answer. Why might the inclusion of children with emotional or behavior disorders in general in classrooms be more or less intensely debated than the inclusion of children with other disabilities? So look at it, come up with some answers. I'm sure that will be something that'll come up. Challenges, achievements, and advocacy. Revising the federal definition of this disability so all eligible children receive needed special education and related services. Establishing a national resolve and commitment of resources sufficient for large scale programs of early detention and prevention, and help closing the gap between what is known about effective special education for students with EBD and what those students experience each day in the classroom. I hope that some of my discussion today and some of the other items will help you have a better understanding of EBD students. Sorry here. Let me decline that. I'll call them later. The next one is the qualifications. I'd like for you to look at the qualifications of EBD online on DESI. It's about 2 pages. So look through that. I'm not going to start going through all of these because some of them are very similar. This one, the addition will be an in-depth social history. Normally the social worker will come up with that. Try developmental history, life events, and reports from parents, physicians, and teachers. Characteristics to a marked degree. And this is also over a longer period of time. Typically, it's going to be a little bit of a difficulty on that one there because it needs to be more than just a week or a couple weeks, normally a couple months of this type of behavior to warrant out anything that might be something different. So anyway, let me go back here. And yeah, this is the end of this week. Next week we'll be going through autism. That'll be the next half of the semester. This is about halfway through, so kind of look at how you're doing, and if you want to do better, give me a call. I'll try to help you, or give me an email. I'll try to come up with some ideas that might help you improve that grade. I don't really give bonus points, so now's the time to see if you need to do any better. But anyway, I'm going to let you go. You all have a great weekend.